We're now joined by the Honorable Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsnight. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Well, let's start with, the congratulations on you being appointed the Banjul Accord Group Council Chairman. And I'm wondering, what does this appointment mean for Nigeria? How does it improve Nigeria's aviation sector? And also, add to that, some of the, key highlights of your 2 years at the saddle at the Aviation Ministry.
Well, thank you. I think, first of all, it is congratulations to Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for championing these reforms in the aviation sector that has reverberated throughout Africa. And then, the West African ministers have realized the leadership role that Nigeria has assumed in terms of reforms in the aviation sector, and that is why they conferred Nigeria with the chairmanship of the sub-region. And what it means is that Nigeria is now championing issues regarding safety and various issues regarding, in the aviation ecosystem in West Africa. Nigeria is now playing a leading role. And the other ministers, they did realize that Nigeria has taken a very large, step forward in terms of its policy reforms. One of the major achievements in the last 2 years is that we have been very big on policy reforms. Before now, what you just had is just an aviation system that was run, without a clear direction of where we are going to be in the next 2, 3, 5 years and 10 years. But right now we have a very clear vision. Maybe as time goes on, or if you have followed us over the last few months and years, you will know all of these policy reforms that we have rolled out. The Cape Town Convention, the IDERA, the framework for insurance over leased aircraft we have rolled out. We have rolled out so many of them, which makes ease of doing business in the aviation sector one of number one in the whole of Nigeria now, and Africa as a whole, in terms of ease of doing business. And the confidence we have brought back into the aviation ecosystem in Nigeria in terms of, the lessors and financiers across the world. So what it means, therefore, for the West African ministers is that they have seen Nigeria as a shining light. And that is credit to Mr. President for championing these reforms. And we are just lucky to be here to implement on behalf of Mr. President. Interesting.
I like that you brought up the reforms that you've carried out so far. But some would say, it's one thing to have reforms, another thing to translate them into reality. Honorable Minister, we hear airline operators complain about operating costs, taxes, charges, and this ultimately affects the passengers. So beyond the reforms such as the wet lease, what else are you doing, especially when it comes to taxes and charges, so that it doesn't trickle to the passengers who are now paying,
and arm and a leg.
Exactly, to fly. What are you doing in that regard? Also, I know you're pushing for the single air transport market. Where does Nigeria currently stand now?
All right, the two-pronged. The question is two-pronged. The first one regarding the multiple charges and taxes.
Yes.
These were the things that existed before we came to office. But then even as aviation minister, you have your own limitations, because I am not the finance minister. I'm not the one running the economy. So we have referred that matter back to those who are in charge of taxes in the country. But I speak with you, a committee is working on that right now, because the president is also extremely concerned about multiple taxation. The president is big on that. He has been doing a lot, in that respect. He has also paid attention to the aviation sector. So very soon, we are going to streamline some of those taxes regarding what you have in the aviation sector. But that is not the only thing that was affecting prices. What was also affecting prices is the lack of capacity of the private operators, because the lack of capacity was also leading to shortage of aircraft. Not only shortage of aircraft, even if they have access to aircraft, you have old aircraft coming to the country. I'm sure you see many Nigerians complain about the type of aircraft that they enter into the country. Now, so let me explain that to Nigerians. The reason why that was happening is that the world lacked confidence in the Nigerian judicial system and the aviation system. They felt that if they brought their equipment here, the equipments were not safe enough. Because in the past, Nigerians were used to taking this aircraft, bringing them to Nigeria, and then it was difficult for these leasers to take their aircraft back. Because all the aircraft you see flying in Nigeria, perhaps only 2% is fully owned. 98% of them are leased. It's not peculiar, it's like that all over the world. Right. Even the biggest airlines, and we have repeated this 100 times on this show, but we'll keep repeating it, that the biggest airlines in the world do not own aircraft. It's difficult. They lease their aircraft. So Nigeria is not also, it's not an exception to that. But for you to now have access to the best aircraft in the world, like for example, the new ones they're just bringing out, or the ones that are not too old, these are seen as very, very expensive. They will take it to a place, a jurisdiction where they have confidence that if there's a default, they can easily get their aircraft out. Right. So if they don't have too much confidence in your system, you will see these old aircraft, the ones that, well, they say that if they don't bring it back, I'm not losing too much. I've gotten enough money from this aircraft. So take 25-year-old aircraft, 20-year, take it to this place. If they use it tired, they bring it back. So we're not in the top tier in terms of access to such.
Are we now?
We are now. This
so
is
in fact,
not only we are number one in Africa. Not just the we are. Before we were 49 point, because these leasers and financiers, they follow what they call the rating of countries. Right. You are rated by the Aviation Working Group in terms of your credibility and access, ease of doing business in your country by foreign investors, foreign financiers. Before we came to office, before President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came to office, we were 49.5% officially. Go and look at the website. Just Google it. Aviation Working Group that collates these scores around the world. When we came to office and we attacked these problems by the practice direction of the Cape Town Convention that we signed, and of course the IDERA, the Irrevocable Deregistration and Export Request Authorization, they call it IDERA. We moved up to 75.5%, which is officially the highest in Africa. So, in fact, our jurisdiction is the best in Africa now in terms of aircraft leasing and all of that. If not that, there's shortage of aircraft across the world now. So let me just tell you that now. We would have started seeing the results as in yesterday. But all over the world now, there's shortage of aircraft because the manufacturers have too much, orders on the line. Boeing, Airbus, Embraer, and all of that. And they all have backlog. But very soon, very, very soon, we are going to, especially when you have COMAC of China coming into the picture, because COMAC is going through this auditing process now. When the Chinese come into this business, COMAC is the Chinese equivalent of Boeing and Airbus.
Everybody sits up when China comes to the table.
I have gone there. I've gone to COMAC. It's humongous.
Right.
It's humongous.
Okay, very quick.
But they are producing planes for the whole of Asia, and they are flying.
But you have a lot to say. It's been 2 years on the side, but I asked you also about the single air transport market because it's very important.
That's the second question.
Yes.
We are the leaders we are the leaders of that. In fact, we are champions of that in Africa. They call it the SATAM. We are the champions of the single African sky.
Okay.
No, hold on. Let me finish with that.
Okay.
And that aims to promote connectivity within Africa. Easy connectivity. As it is, African nations are still setting hurdles all over their countries in terms of connectivity.
We don't travel amongst ourselves.
And there's a single sky in Europe. If you go to Europe, you can see how easy it is to move from Portugal to Spain, to Italy, and all that. It's so easy. No, there's single sky in the sense that there's no restriction in terms of flying across Europe. But here, imagine my flying to Cameroon. We're not flying to Cameroon for a long time. It's only during this government we have done a deal with Angolan airline. Algerian airline. They come from Algiers to Abuja, Abuja to Douala back. So we have opened up that route now. Okay. But many other African countries are not connected because there's no single African. So, but Nigeria is one of the countries that's championing the single African skies. And the ICAO requires that you must have regional blocks first. Cooperating to champion it, to open their regional. So before you now start doing talking of African East to African South Africa to North, they said regional blocks should come together, make sure they promote it, and then from there you now move to other regions. That is why we have done the bag for West Africa. South Africa has its own. East Africa has their own. But West Africa, it's called the bag, the Banjul Accord. Right. And that is in line with the ICAO requirements that we are now promoting connectivity within Africa, West Africa, by the BAG, the BAG group, of which I'm now chairman.
Okay, great. Now let's still stay with, some of the policies you've come up with. You resumed the $300 helicopter landing fee, which was, actually suspended. You suspended it about a year ago. But yes, operators are saying that this $300 levy is a scam. They are saying, how is it that a private entity is collecting levies for the federal government? I'd like you to address that. And you have definitively said Nigeria is not spending a dime on a national carrier. What happened to the Nigeria Air project?
Don't be asking, double
hold on.
Big questions.
Yeah.
Let me handle one.
Okay, great.
To the other one.
And you'll come to the other one.
You're missing both.
Right.
These are two different issues.
Go ahead.
So the first one is a helicopter landing levy. That was before I came into office. They signed an agreement. Our predecessors signed agreement for helicopters landing offshore. Those are also, they call them helipads or so offshore. That all over the world they collect levies for that, because you also have NAMA, which is the Nigerian Aerospace Management Agency, regulating this thing, giving them signals, regulating the airspace. And so they have to also pay their bills. NAMA has to pay their bills. So over the years, they discovered that they have not been paying levies, helicopters landing offshore. And so our predecessors came up with this idea that, look, listen, all over the world, helicopters pay such levies. So when I came, and there was a lot of rancor, especially among the airline operators of Nigeria, I suspended it and said, look, I said to a small committee, look into this. Is this practice existing anywhere in the world? And all that. So they came up with a report and said, look, in many jurisdictions, they do collect such levies. And we need to increase revenues to the federal government, right? So the airline operators that protested were part of that committee. So I told them, unless you reach an agreement with the airline operators, I will not go on with this. So the airline operators went into dialogue with them, and they did agree at the end of the day. The airline operators have agreed and signed. I have the document agreeing to the fee, but they said they will not be the ones paying, because they are the ones, they rent their helicopters out to oil companies. Are you following? So they said the fee will now be passed on to the oil companies, not them. Because if you pass it on to them, they have to increase their charter fee and all that. So now the last vestige of this is now the oil companies that came up and said, no, you don't pass it on to me. So they protested last week. And I said, okay, look, this is the last concern we have on this. Set up a small committee, look at the concern of the oil companies. But it is revenue to the federal government. Right. It's not revenue to private. It's revenue to the federal government. It's only that before we came, they engaged somebody who did this study and who brought this proposal to collect a small fraction of that fee, but drive it on behalf of the federal government. So it is fee to the federal government.
Right. The second leg of the question. Nigeria will not be spending
all over the world.
Yeah.
All over the world. Even British Airways is not owned by the British people again. National governments all over the world are removing their hands from their national airlines. They are not running because it's very capital intensive. In most cases, it is public institutions cannot run such things for profit. Yeah. You know how Nigerian Airways was. Half of time it was filled by public officials, free tickets, by ministers, by senators, and all of that.
But have you investigated the Nigeria Air project? Has that been investigated?
We have said that over. We don't have to repeat it. The court stopped that. It is the court.
Yeah. Okay.
It's not me. So I'm not going back into that.
I'm
just going forward.
We need to go. In 20 seconds, if you can give me a month or a time frame. You've said we are flying directly to Venezuela and Brazil soon. How soon is that?
Well, the Venezuela is ready to start like yesterday. Great. The Venezuela airline will ready. So, but we are not sure of the date for Brazil. But if we can fly to Venezuela, then we can connect.
Go to Brazil. Fantastic.
Yes,
Honorable Minister Festus Keyamo is of the Aviation and Aerospace Development, given his scorecard in the last 2 years. And congratulations again for being chairman of the BAG. As you say, the West Africa Banjul Accord Group.